So St. Luke, evangelist. Evangelist means one of the authors of the Gospels, so he's an evangelist, and he is, the technical term, anybody can be an evangelist. An evangelist is someone who shares the good news. And so, but Luke in a particular way, and Luke also, Luke an evangelist, Luke a martyr, but not an apostle. And so I think that might be why this reading was chosen, the 72 disciples. So we have the 12 apostles, and then we have the 72 disciples. Very likely Luke was in that group. But Luke's great teaching, Luke's great experience was traveling with Paul. And so in the first letter, or in the first reading today, St. Paul's letter to Timothy talks about the fact that Luke is the only one with me. And if you read the Acts of the Apostles carefully, you will note that the author Luke, who is reporting on the life of mostly in the first half, St. Peter, and mostly in the second half of the Acts of the Apostles, St. Paul, Luke will say, we were here and we were there and we did this and we did that. And so Luke is traveling with Paul. And so Luke's gospel, in some respects, is Paul's gospel. Okay, now, it's Luke's, but Luke and Paul worked together a tremendous amount. Now, what about Luke's gospel? We have 4 gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called the synoptic gospels, and they share a very common structure. Most of the stories in Matthew, Mark, and Luke are repeated over and over in the 3 Gospels, but they're told with a different perspective. And Luke's perspective, very often Luke is a champion of the poor. And Luke has a very prominent place for the Blessed Mother in his Gospel. And also in the Gospel of Luke, there's this great emphasis on mercy. And I was thinking about that this morning, the mercy of God. And who are your enemies? Who are your enemies? And I wouldn't imagine, I hope that you don't have a long list of enemies. Okay, I hope you don't have to get the 2 notepads out to list your enemies. But who are your enemies, okay? You know, our enemies are not flesh and blood. You know, our enemies are not flesh and blood. Our enemy is evil. You know, and Luke wants us to see everybody Jesus wants us to see. And Luke putting his own memory and his own experience and his own prayer on the gospel that he reports. Luke wants to make sure that we don't see our fellow human beings as our enemies. If they are evil, it is because they are under the bondage of sin. And Jesus, the great physician of souls, comes to heal and save, right? Now, don't get me wrong. People can give their lives over to darkness. People can give their lives over to evil. But even then, that's not our enemy. Our enemy is the evil, is the principalities and powers, the evil ones of the present darkness. And so Luke makes sure that the Samaritan is not our enemy. The prodigal son is not our enemy. And Luke tells these stories of Jesus coming to save the Samaritan, or to give the Samaritan an opportunity to show mercy, or the prodigal son to return home. And so Luke has this great emphasis on mercy, mercy, mercy. And so we remember today the mercy of God. And we pray that as Jesus is merciful, so by his grace we can be merciful. If you haven't read the Acts of the Apostles and the Gospel of Luke, may I please encourage you to do so today. In their completely by yourself, not just what's read at Mass, but the whole thing by yourself, in a relatively short period of time, and let Luke be your teacher and your guide on the mercy of God.